Kalimera, Kalispera, Kalinichta. No matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be, thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. It is March Madness, the best sports tournament other than the Champions League and the World Cup for me. And we're entering into a little madness when it comes to the Arsenal. So calm heads prevail. Perfect guest for that today. Let's rock and roll.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Welcome everyone back to Squad Central, and welcome back my Cypriot brother from another mother, Mr. Harry Symeou. Yes, or Harry?
How's it going? You all right? Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back, Mr. Symeou. And how you doing? Everything good?
Yeah, all good. Can't complain. I'm in that weird space that the international break brings where, you know, you're kind of glad that you're not mad busy, but at the same time, you're a little bit bored as well. And I feel like I'm there and I'm getting dragged into doing things that I would never
like
normally do. No, not this. Like I'm talking about around the house. Like, my wife is well aware now of when the international breaks are, which is a problem because it's well, you know, if you're not that busy this week, could we do X, Y, Z? Then you know, one thing
we go to the
leads
zoo
to another. Yeah, that's it. And before you know it, you're money down and you're also mentally fatigued as well.
You know what's really funny is, and good evening squaddies, everyone in the house, at ease to you, and don't forget to listen to our Chief Like Officer Tammy. Hit the like button. It's free to get in, and it helps the channel as well. You know, Harry, we complain about a lot of football, and then when the football's gone, we're complaining that it's gone. It's like the English weather, right? You know, in the summer when it's so hot, it's like, oh my God, it's so hot. But then, you know, winter comes and it's cold. No such problems in Cyprus, though, where generally everything's like chill with an umbrella.
Nice. It's exactly what you want.
How are you spending your... I find the weekends the toughest. I don't find during the week, because I'm busy with other projects and stuff. I find the weekends the toughest. How are you going to handle the snooze fest this weekend?
Well, I'm actually going on a stag do this weekend to Dublin in Ireland. So I'm looking forward to just letting my hair down a little bit and waking up in a hotel. I'll probably have a hangover, but at least there won't be any kids to wake me up at sort of 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's kind of trying to find that balance in that. But yeah, I'm going away for the weekend. Really looking forward to it. Going with some really good lads. So yeah, looking forward to having a good time and a few cheeky drinks. How about you?
Well, this weekend I might go and watch some MLS or USL, so I get a little bit of a fix on the football. It's also March Madness here, which is a basketball tournament. It's really quite unbelievable. College basketball. It's outside of the Super Bowl. It's probably the single biggest sporting event in the United States, and I'm obsessed with it. Like I fill out my bracket, I do the whole thing. Unfortunately, my team's not in it this year. But it's so entertaining. And to see these young college players, it's really quite unbelievable. And knowing, you know, their life's about to change, going into the NBA draft and going pro and I remember watching Steph Curry at the NCAA tournament. I love it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm literally going to be indoors watching basketball, which Clive Palmer would probably appreciate. Probably the only gooner who would appreciate that. Right. Harry, you know what today is as well? I love it. Everyone says like, we're 5 minutes in, not a lick of Arsenal yet. This is great. It's Dickie Bow Thursday. So you're our Dickie Bow Thursday guy.
Where have you found that?
Well, we're friends on Facebook, so I stalked you. But Harry's not taking a selfie of himself. I did cut out his beautiful wife, who is actually, you know, the beauty in the picture, but I'm not going to put a picture of Harry's wife up without his permission. So here you are, Dickie Bow Thursday. May I say, you're wearing that very well. We've had Odegaard, we've had David Raya, we've had Kai Havertz, we've had the gaffer as well. We've even gone far back to put Tony Adams up as well, Dennis Bergkamp. But I'm saying you're in the top 5 there, Mr. Symeou. Wearing it well.
Once in a while, you got to pull out all the stops, haven't you? I think this was for a wedding. I think it was for my mate's wedding. So once in a while, you got to pull out all the stops, and yeah, it makes a change, doesn't it, from wearing scruffy t-shirts and jeans?
It does. The Greek Cypriot James Bond right there. Okay, let's get stuck into this, shall we? The theme of today's show. If you guys remember correctly, we had Harry on a few months ago, and then we did the same thing with Arsblog on our SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And at the time, our season was in a little bit of a better place. There was no injury to Bukayo Saka, no injury to Martinelli, Havertz. We were kind of in the midst of the Odegaard not knowing. The transfer window hadn't kicked in. So there was a lot of optimism about the season still. So I gave Harry some homework, and I thought it would be interesting to revisit the SWOT analysis, especially as we're entering the Andrea Berta era, and what that could mean for the club, what we know, what we've seen. So Harry, I'm going to hand it over to you. Squaddies, you're going to join in as we're going. And we're going to start off with strengths, Harry. And I feel like you can look at this as well from a now perspective, you know, to the summer and a little bit beyond.
Yeah. So in terms of strengths, if I'm sort of making that assessment and judgment now, I'm going to say it's our defensive solidity. I think that's our biggest strength. And I think even at times where, you know, we have struggled to score goals, struggled to create as many opportunities as we'd like, we've always got that to kind of lean on. And when you don't concede many goals, you're always in with a shout of winning games. So what I've learned over the course of that period of time that you just mentioned is that I knew we were pretty good defensively anyway, but I now feel like it's something that we can lean on even more so, because as I say, it's only a few weeks ago that we were in the title race. It wasn't that long ago. You know, I know people have talked about it as though, you know, it's all fallen apart really, really early, and it has fallen apart now. I'm not going to deny that. But I think if you go back 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks ago, there was a little bit of hope, you know, when they dropped points in that Merseyside derby. Around that time, there was a little bit of hope. And the reason we got to that point, despite having attacking issues throughout the campaign, you go back to the very beginning of the season, we lost Martin Odegaard in the second international break. And, you know, you have those 2 really early ones in the season, don't you? And so our attacking problems started from then. Then we're getting back. We're without other players. You know, we've been without Gabby Jesus. We've got no Havertz at the minute. Martinelli's been out. Mikel Merino's been playing at centre forward, for God's sake. So we've got to a place where, you know, we're not where we want to be by no stretch of the imagination. But given all the issues we've had, it could have been a hell of a lot worse. And I put that down to, for me, what's the biggest strength of this Mikel Arteta side is the fact that they are defensively very resilient, very sound. And as a result of that, they're always going to be in games. It doesn't take multiple goals to win every game. And that's kind of saved us a little bit this season.
I totally agree with you, which is why I think I had Ben Jacobs on yesterday, and we were talking about Big Gabby and the Saudi interest and how real that all is. And for me, he's been by far, I think, along with David Raya, our best player this season. I think if Saka stays fit, of course, he's in the mix. But he's just been absolutely cliche, but colossal at the back. And these two complement each other so well, Harry. And they kind of remind me of Ferdinand and Vidic. And I've called them like the beauty and the beast. You know, you need Big Gabby, his vocal aspect of the way he plays the game. He has true leadership on the pitch. Saliba is kind of a defender that, you know, silkier like Ferdinand, you know, can play it out the back really well. Just the timing of his tackles. He makes everything look like so effortless and so seamless. And I think that this is, as well as, by the way, the two, when you talk about defense, I think you're also talking, you know, I think David Raya did a show with Lee and was talking about how I've enjoyed eating crow on this one, because if you're wrong and it means the manager and the club are right, that's a good thing. And there's nothing better than being wrong when it comes to signings. And I think David Raya has been, I know that he made that mistake in his position against Bruno Fernandes, but Harry, what I love is how he never hides in games. It's the same thing with the mistake at Tottenham, right? he always seems to bounce back from making a mistake in a game.
Yeah.
Whereas not a lot of goalkeepers are able to do that. They kind of collapse in the moment. And I'm just making sure that David Raya is also part of that conversation you're talking about in terms of the back.
And I think you have to include Jurriën Timber in that conversation this season as well, because the way that guy's come back from an ACL injury is just incredible. He's had to play tons of football because Ben White's not been fit, because at times we've had issues at left back. Prior to the emergence of Miles Lewis-Skelly, Calafiori's fitness hasn't been great. Tommy Asu's been nowhere to be seen all season. And Jurriën Timber is part of the constant play, those constants at the back for us. Raya, Timber, Gabriel and Saliba have been rocks this season. They all deserve their flowers. Just on the Gabby stuff really quickly, I know that Ben Jacobs was saying that, there's a serious interest in him from Saudi Arabia. Can I just say, I would be so disappointed in Big Gabby if he was to have his head turned by the Saudi Pro League at this stage in his career. He's super passionate. He's super motivated. And honestly, right now, he is in the top 5 centre-backs in world football. He is in that place. He is in that space. And he does not need to sort of pivot towards where the money is. He will be handsomely paid throughout the remainder of his career regardless. I'm pretty confident Arsenal are going to give him a contract very soon that better reflects his sort of status within the squad. And I just like the idea that he would just pack it all in and go to Saudi Arabia. For me, it doesn't make sense. And I know that there might be a big offer on the table, and I know that the club might consider that if it's too good to kind of turn down. But that would really hurt me, that one, if he was to make that move. There are other players like, if you told me tomorrow that Leandro Trossard's going over there, for instance, I'd say, okay. It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't surprise me. But Big Gabby, no, surely not.
Yeah, and Ben was of the volition that Arsenal do not want to lose Big Gabby, at all. And when you think about it, he to me is one of those. How do you replace him?
Yeah,
I know that people, even Real Madrid, are looking at Harry. Who's the Bournemouth centre back?
Heisenhausen,
right? Yeah. Who's gaining a lot of steam in terms of rumors and transfer market and stuff like that. But when you're talking about continuing with, because we're out of process, we're in progress now, it has to lead to success. You want someone like Big Gabby there. I mean, losing him, I think will have a similar effect, although he's been more consistent and a much better player. I think you've seen a little bit how Xhaka was missed last season, maybe towards the end, the leadership and what he kind of brought to the team. And that partnership is, to me, one of the most important in our team. And I would be really disappointed. Listen, you can't blame somebody who wants to go off and earn money where you create generational wealth for your family. How much is enough? I mean, it's really difficult to call, but Duran went. I mean, he's so young, Duran, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you stop any of this from happening.
No, I know what you're saying, and I think the money's incredible. And some of these players might look at it and go, I can go over there for 2-3 years and I can come back. But let me tell you this, the standard is so far from where it needs to be. Once you go over there, I don't think it is a place you can necessarily return from with the same, with the same reputation. And sometimes, you fall off the pace and you're not getting back on the train. It's happened to many players over the years. And I think it will be such a shame from an Arsenal point of view if we were to see that central defensive pairing that we've managed to kind of put together break up without achieving big things, because they're good enough to, they deserve to. And look, if the Saudi League had picked up, I would look at it and I'd go, okay, it doesn't seem so bad. But I've been watching it quite closely. Not to the point where I've been sitting watching 90-minute games, but I've been keeping a tab on it and keeping eyes on it because I was really interested by this project. I looked at it and people were comparing it to the China thing. Do you remember when there was a period where the Chinese league were going out and bringing in players? And then obviously they put a rule in place that limited the number of foreigners, which killed that completely. But when the Saudi stuff started to come out and it started to emerge, I looked at it very differently. I thought, well, these guys have got the money to go for the long haul. This is not going to be, let's invest loads for 1 year and then it will just all fall apart. I felt like this was going to be a 5-10 year thing. And it's been 2, maybe 3 years now, and I just don't see the progress in it. And that would alarm me if I was a player. If you could see it improving, if you could see it developing, then maybe you consider it. But I think if you've got real footballing ambition, and I know that it's easy to say when you're not the one having a massive check waved under your face, but I just, it's not the right place to go at that stage in your career, I don't think.
Yeah, I was saying to Ben, well, he was talking about how 2025 summer transfer is going to be much like 2023. They've got some big lofty goals. Vinicius Jr. is one, Gabriel is one. Like there's a 2023 type caliber list of players that they're going to aggressively go after. Go
on, Safe. I was just going to say, sorry. If they're going to take players away from Real Madrid, if that happens, if Real Madrid lose a star to the Saudi Pro League, we're all done for. That would be, and that you can see why they want to try that. You can see why they think that doing something like that would be massive, because it would send shockwaves through football.
That one would be, because Benzema and Ronaldo, I mean, Duran's probably the youngest, right? I think that's it's a little bit, like Major League Soccer, where players are going there in the twilight of their career, and they've tried to kind of change that. And when you look at, a signing like Vinny Jr., that would be massive. What's interesting, what he talked about yesterday was, I didn't know this. I mean, I'm not well versed. I like to be educated. That they get designated to teams. Yeah. So did you know that, Harry?
Yeah. So they're bought by the Saudi, whatever it's called. There's a fund basically that buys these players, and this fund own a group of football clubs, and then they will bring players into. I think it might be the PIF that is part of Newcastle United. I think it's the same group, if I'm not mistaken, but I did know that basically they've got a massive pot of gold. They go out, they bring in players, and then they decide which club would be the best fit for those players, because their goal is not to build one team, it's to build the whole league, and they want it to be competitive, and they want it to be eye-catching. And I did know that, and it blows my mind. It's crazy.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? All right, what other strengths do you have, Harry?
The other strengths I've got, I'd probably say spirit, fight. I don't think that anybody can deny that or question that about this Arsenal team, even at a time where results haven't gone our way. I can't remember too many times coming away from an Arsenal game thinking they didn't give it absolutely everything. And that's been a constant over the last 2 or 3 seasons. Have we fallen short at times? Yes. Have we not been good enough technically, tactically? Yeah, for sure. But the idea that this team doesn't care or doesn't want it, or I hear some people suggesting that they're not on board with Mikel Arteta anymore and his methods, and I just think that's all a load of rubbish. I think the real strength is the unity within the group. I do worry that unity could be impacted, though, by maybe what happened in January, where we had our manager sitting there telling everybody that we needed something in the window. It didn't happen. We had players like Declan Rice coming out in interviews and saying, we need something right before the window closed. So the only thing that could potentially threaten that is, people starting to think, hold on, is this club actually putting in the direction that we think it is? But at this stage, I'm not willing to put that down as anything other than strength, the unity, because I think it's there. And, you're seeing, how many players have we watched this season as well play out of position? Like I always think that's a really good indicator of where people are at in terms of their attitude. Because often you get players that get played out of position and they sulk and they don't really give it everything. And, they're always going to fall back on that excuse of, well, that's not my position. That's not what I do. I haven't seen that from anyone. I've seen Nwaneri go out and play on the right flank. I've seen Trossard go and play at centre forward. I've seen Marino go and play at centre forward. I've seen our fullbacks switch over to different sides. I've seen Miles Lewis-Skelly, a midfielder by trade, come in and take on that left-back role. We've seen so much willingness that I think that's probably another thing that I would put in the strengths column for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if they have a choice. Mikel's like, you're playing right back, Thomas.
But you can see it though, can't you? You can see it in a player if they're...
they've embraced it.
Yeah, they've embraced it and they've given it everything. And nobody's using it as an excuse, which I love.
Yeah. Fair point. Right. Okay. We're going to move on to weaknesses. And I don't know if this is a weakness or a threat, but I wanted to put this comment up for you from Charles, because I thought it was quite interesting as we riff off the Gabriel conversation. Gabriel is the sacrification transfer. If Arsenal negotiate 125 million Isak transfer and the solution is internal only, it's meant to be that no one else. Anyway, you can see what he's saying. I mean, there's been rumors, I don't know if any of these are true, about Calafiori and Real Madrid, and you've got Big Gabby. What we were talking about with Ben yesterday too was he was saying if you get Thomas Partey off the books, which is a huge wage, right? You're potentially going to get Zinchenko off the books. You're going to get Jorginho off the books. Gabriel Jesus isn't going anywhere because of the injury. Kieran Tierney, who's not like a super high earner, but it's still, you're getting him off the books. You're creating, like this openness and this availability when it comes to wages. And he also talked about how if you're going after like the 50 million pound players versus Isak, who's going to be 150 million, right? So I wondered what you thought about this in terms of, is there going to be a sacrificial kind of selling? Does that include Martinelli, Harry? Like, what do you think?
There could be. I wouldn't be surprised if there was. I've said for a long, long time now that as a football club, we've invested a lot of money, and people will argue about where that money come from. Some will say, it's come from the club, the money that the club's generated. Others will say that it's been created by the sort of refinancing that KSE oversaw, et cetera, et cetera. So you can get into the ins and outs of where the money's come from. But what is undeniable is that Arsenal in the last few years have spent a lot more money than they had in the decade prior. So for me, there was always going to come a point, and I've said this before, where that investment was going to slow down, and where having made up most of the gap between where we were and where we want to be, and we're not there yet, but having made up most of that gap, we were always going to come to a point where it was going to get back to that kind of self-sustaining model that we know that the Cronkies want to see in operation. And I felt like last summer was the first indication of us getting there. It was a summer in which we made numerous sales. Yes, we did some business in terms of ins, but we didn't really spend much, if anything, beyond what we brought in. And so that was kind of the first point of it leveling out for me. So to go into the next summer and say, I think that they're going to spend 300 million quid without bringing any money in, I'm not sure I buy that. I'd like to think that. I'd like to believe that, but I can't see it somehow. So there is a good chance that there will be that type of sale. Who it will be, I don't know. If you could get 40 million for Leandro Trossard from a Saudi club, which you might, you never know. That is something that you might look at. There's other options as well. I don't want it to be Big Gabby. I'd rather we pivoted to a different striker than Isak if it meant losing Big Gabby, because that is taking a real step back, and I don't want to see us do that. But in terms of, sorry, go on.
I was going to say real quick, what's your take on Calafiori?
Love him, because I think he's everything that modern day football is lacking at the minute. A sort of a bit of a maverick, someone who you kind of let off the lead and you don't really often know where he's going to end up. I think I called him on my podcast a wild horse, in that if you take the saddle and the reins off of him and you untie him and you let him go, you just don't know where he's going to end up. Is he going to end up at the other end of the pitch putting the ball in someone's net? Is he going to end up on the wrong side of the pitch? I remember commentating on the game we played earlier this season against PSG. And I remember doing my prep for that game and thinking, bloody hell, PSG down that right-hand side. I think they had Lee Kang in playing that day. I think Dembele might have been playing. And then they had Ashraf Hakimi down that right flank. And I thought, bloody hell, we know how much Hakimi loves to get forward. And I thought, surely Calafiori is going to stay put tonight. Surely he's going to show a bit of discipline. And he popped up in the 10 position on numerous occasions in the first half. And I remember looking at it going, what on earth is that? And I asked Mikel Arteta after the game, was that deliberate? Was that a ploy to try and confuse PSG? And he said, no. He said he does what he wants to do. So he's got that unpredictability about him, which I love. But at the same time, that makes him unreliable for me in a team that demands structure defensively. So I'm not sure where he fits into the bigger picture. I think with Gabriel and Saliba inside of him, you can get away with playing Calafiori on the left as a left back. But if I'm then asking him to be one of my centre backs, I feel like that might be a bit risky.
Yeah. I put this down as well because I really think football's lacking popcorn,
100%.
Get off your feet players. It's all become so robotic and, just, so that's a conversation for another day, and maybe it will come up in our conversation. But what are your weaknesses, Harry?
Lack of creativity. I think that outside of Martin Odegaard, we really struggle for that, particularly in the midfield. An over-reliance on a number of players, Saka, Havertz, and Odegaard as well is another one. You've seen his form drop off and we're lost. I think there's an imbalance in our game at the moment. I think that sometimes the strength that I've been talking about, the defensive solidity, sometimes in order to maintain that, we perhaps take away from that kind of free-flowing nature that you want to see, and we take away from that spontaneity. And I do feel like when we've had a lot of injuries in the forward line, Mikel Arteta has opted to lean on that defensive side of things. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but you can lean too far. And I think we have leaned too far, and that has taken away from us. So to kind of wrap it up into a more concise point, I would say lack of creativity just generally, because outside of Martin Odegaard, I can't think of another creative midfield player we have at the club. And maybe that's something that goes back to last summer. We let Smith Rowe go. We let Vieira go. Not saying either of them were necessarily good enough to take Arsenal to the next level, but both of them were that type of player, and we've lost them both, and we brought in Mikel Merino, who isn't that. Then you talk about over-reliance. I think the over-reliance has come to bite us on the backside, because for me, it's not a coincidence that the two players that have probably been run into the ground most in Saka and Havertz are the two players that not just pulled their hamstrings, but tore their hamstrings, requiring surgery. So, yeah, over-reliance, lack of creativity, and I think an imbalance in our game where we've leaned on that defensive strength a little bit too much, to the point where maybe people, I'm not going to say are scared or fearful, because I don't think Mikel Arteta discourages free-flowing football or discourages attacking play. But I think when you get into the habit of something, sometimes it can be very difficult to sort of zoom out, take stock of where you're actually at, and then put yourself back on the right path. Sometimes someone else needs to do it for you, and I don't think that internally they've spotted that just yet.
I was watching the overlap, and I know that he rubs some people up the wrong way. I know you do shows with him on TalkSport. I've done segments with him before. Rory Jennings was talking about Cole Palmer, and there's this notion that if you step out of your box, Maresca's going to sub you. And then there's also he was doing well earlier on this season and scored 11 or 12 goals up until Christmas and has kind of disappeared. Is that Maresca's fault too? But it kind of goes back to what you were saying about the strength being the fact that players embrace no matter what position they have to play. I do think that there's been a little life sucked out of them this season in terms of, I know joy doesn't win titles, but it certainly helps. I think maybe losing Saka, I think, was like an uppercut to the whole team. How are you not going to be affected by that when he's your best player? I think that, Kai Havertz underappreciated. I've talked about that ad nauseum on this show, and I was talking to Natalie and Tony about it at the weekend. He's so probably the most dissed, underappreciated player in Premier League history, Kai Havertz. That's my opinion about him, and I believe we're missing him, just to have him thinking about Real Madrid and the shithousery as well as the physicality and stuff like that. So I wonder if this kind of possession obsession, Harry, has also stifled the flair players. And when you look at someone like Waneri, who I think is the one of the first get off your feet type players since Alexis Sanchez, you would hate to have him stifled. And you've seen a little bit the last 2 or 3 games where he's played, he's not been as explosive. Do you agree or disagree that could be a weakness? A possibility?
I certainly think that the lack of freedom afforded to the players at times, at least from what we can see, it might not be the instruction directly put across from the manager to the players, but it feels like there is a little bit of tying of the hands behind players' backs at the minute, you know, and maybe it's not that. Maybe it's that they've run out of ideas. Maybe it's that they are facing low blocks week after week after week, and they're finding it really, really difficult. I felt though that that's been a bit of an issue all season. We used to gamble. We used to say, leave your 2 men forward, no problem. Gabby and Saliba will deal with it because we've got that stature of defender. It almost felt like at times we were happy to say, do you know what? We will push that extra body on. Because in theory, Soph, Mikel Arteta's style is really front and forward thinking. How many other managers let their 2 8s go and join the forward line and make it a 5? Like to see that, it suggests that Mikel Arteta is really big on pushing players into the box. And we've seen games at PSV, games at Sporting, away in the Champions League, tough games, and we've thrown those bodies forward. So he is in there somewhere. On Nwaneri specifically, I don't think that his dip in form, if you want to call it that, I almost feel wrong saying that because he's so young and we shouldn't be relying on him.
Yeah, that's maybe I needed to rephrase that. It's not a dip in form, it's a stifling of...
And I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree. I've said on recent podcasts that I don't think he's been as effective recently. But I don't know how much of that I want to attribute to the manager and to the system or to the players around him, and how much of that I should attribute to the fact that he's just a 17-year-old kid and he's going to be inconsistent. Because we've seen that time and time again, haven't we? So, yeah, I think there is...
Maybe I should have picked Trossard, like Trossard. It's been so like hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. It's crazy. Martinelli this season, I know he would, for pre-injury, hot and cold, hot and cold.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like a common thread.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when Leandro Trossard had Bukayo Saka on the other flank, or Martinelli to come into the team and replace him, or Kai Havertz through the middle, who he combines really well with, by the way. When you see that, you probably look at it and you go, well, Trossard, if he does disappear into the shadows for 2-3 weeks, it's not as big a deal. But when we've sort of ended up in this space where we're heavily reliant upon him, it's been a while now where Trossard is the senior attacker. He is the one. Mikel Merino's playing at centre forward. He's a midfielder, and people will question whether he's good enough to play for us there, let alone at centre forward. And then you've got a 17-year-old kid on the other side. We've really kind of put the microscope on Leandro Trossard, and we've been sitting there waiting for him to deliver, and it hasn't really happened. But he was never the star of anybody's movie for me. He was always part of the supporting cast, and I think that's become even more apparent in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I always loved him as the super sub, and he had this edge about him when that was happening. Any other weaknesses for you, Harry?
Not really. Those are the ones that I had down. Those are the ones that really kind of jump out to me. Yeah, I think those are the ones for me. The lack of creativity, the over-reliance on certain players, and maybe a need to kind of just redress the balance between defensive and offensive work.
Okay, let's move on to opportunities before we get to threats, which are external more so than internal, things you can't control. Opportunities, Harry.
Okay, so there's some big opportunities here, but whether Arsenal are going to take them in the way that we'd like to see them take them remains to be seen. You know, there's an opportunity to go out there and get the piece of the puzzle that we've been missing for years at centre forward. And there's an opportunity to go big and get the right guy. Now, it would be incredibly frustrating if after all this time of kind of waiting for the centre forward that we want, we end up bringing in someone that we could have got our hands on a year or two ago. And my fear is that that might happen because we're put off by the price tag of some of our preferred options. If we go and get Alexander Isak this summer, whatever it costs, I'll be over the moon. I'll be delighted. If we get Benjamin Sesko, I'll be relatively pleased, but I think there's still an element of risk on that one that maybe people are overlooking a little bit. But yeah, big opportunity is to go and get that centre forward that completes the puzzle. Another big opportunity, I think, for us is in midfield, because for a while now, I've looked at the midfield and I felt that the balance has just been a little bit off, and that while Partey, Rice and Odegaard are really good players, and I love watching them guys together, and they've had, you know, your Jorginhos coming off the bench and whatever, I've always felt like the balance has just been slightly off, in the sense of you want a six that can dictate the play, but is also mobile and physical enough to defend alone at times. I think Thomas Partey was that. I think right now, as much as he's had a really good season, I can't see him maintaining that. I can't see him maintaining this level of fitness that allows him to be that player in the years to come. I don't like Declan Rice sitting as the 6 because I don't think he's got that passing range that you need from there. I don't think he's a tempo setter. But equally, I don't think Declan Rice has the guile that you sometimes need in the final third to unlock defenses. So I feel like it's all a little bit imbalanced. Like Rice doesn't quite fit in his current position. Partey fits where he is, but I can't rely on Partey to stay fit for the next 2-3 seasons. You know, this season that he's having now is great, but would you bet your house that he's going to continue that? You wouldn't. And so the reason I class this as an opportunity is because we've kind of come to a natural end with both Partey and Jorginho. They're both out of contract in the summer. Thomas Partey, as far as we know, is not engaged in talks right now over a renewal. The same with Jorginho. It looks like Jorginho could be heading off to Brazil to sign for Flamengo. And so the reason I class this as an opportunity is because, yes, okay, we've got a need, and there's a sort of, you could say it's a weakness that we're going to lose 2 midfielders in the summer. But for me, it's an opportunity to just redress the balance, to just buy the types of players that we really need to give us that nice balance between creativity and the defensive solidity that we've been leaning on and that we thrive off. So that's why it's an opportunity. Go and get a couple of players in that really do get you to where you want to be, that complement Rice, that complement Odegaard, because those two are mainstays. Thomas Partey and Jorginho have been players that we've been talking about moving on from for quite a while, and that's not to discredit any of them. I think they've both been fantastic for Arsenal, and I expected it from Partey. Jorginho, he was much maligned when we signed him. There was a lot of people that looked at that and said, what a silly deal that was. When you consider that we paid around about 10 million quid for him, that's been an awesome bit of business. I'm sad to see them go, but them departing, which looks like the most likely outcome, provides us with an opportunity. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Jorginho, I'm sad to see go. I think he's been so good in the dressing room, and from the stories that you hear, the leadership, how he helps the young players, just his character. And yeah, it was a surprise. Was it 10 or 12 million we paid for him? Either way, you know, I think Jorginho will have a say in this quarterfinal against Real Madrid at some point in the game. I still think he's one of the best when we've lacked creativity. And because of the way Mikel wants to play, Harry, and you can correct me, you're smarter at tactics than I am, is he's the guy that could unlock a defense, that could provide that killer pass. I mean, we saw him single-handedly destroy England in the Euro finals, and he's just been that player, but kind of that possession obsession, but the work off the ball and the tracking back and what's required. Jorginho just doesn't have the legs for that anymore, but he definitely has the legs to be able to unlock a pass and split a defense. And I think that we'll still see him have a say in the Champions League for us at some point in a game. I'm not saying he's going to start a game, but if you need something, I think he's been really good value for money, Jorginho.
Yeah, for me, he's been great value. It's been fantastic value. Sometimes you need an experienced head. Sometimes you need players that can come off the bench and do your job. And I think there are some players that are really good at coming into a game cold and taking to it really quickly. And there are others that need that rhythm of playing from the start every week. And what I've loved about Jorginho since he's come to Arsenal is he's been able to just be thrown on in certain circumstances and in certain situations. And it's like he's been playing every week. And to be able to do that at the latter stages, if you like, of his career, I think says a lot about how he takes care of himself, of his attitude, and how intelligent he is. His intelligence makes up for some of the shortfalls in maybe his physical profile.
Welcome to the 12th Man Raiders. Thanks for joining myself and Harry. Potsy, thanks for sending some folks over here to us. Potsy will be on the show tomorrow, spending a budget of approximately 250 to 300 million pounds.
That's not enough for Potsy, Soph. He needs $500 million.
Can I just say, the WhatsApp group and the exchanges between you and Potsy are just classic, absolute classic. I just sit ringside and I just eat my my popcorn. I'm looking for popcorn players, but I got popcorn players. in the WhatsApp group, and it's always a fun discussion. But yeah, he needs 1 billion. I think he needs 1 billion. Fair to say.
For sure. Give him 1 billion.
Oh my God, so funny. So join us tomorrow at 4:00 UK time for Get Off the Potsy, and we're going to spend some money. Harry, before, seeing as we're on opportunities, I want to know what that midfield. Here's what I'd like, right? Just real quick, because I know you could do this off the top of your head, is I saw your comments about Zubimendi not being sold, and I was talking to Graham Hunter about Zubi, and he's loves him. He's a big fan. He doesn't know if he'll translate well to the Premier League. He's a bit of a homeboy, right? And I don't know how that's going to work out. Mikel Merino, I asked him about, the Mikel Merino connection. He seems to be, I think, maybe someone who will stay put. But aside from that, who's your striker? Who's your midfield? Like, seeing as we're doing this with Potsy tomorrow, I'd like to let him know what you were saying. Are you spending all that money on Isaac? Are you spreading it around? What does it look like for you?
It's a really difficult one. I've been thinking about this a lot because I wanted to record a sort of very short pod called My Dream Summer before I go away tomorrow, so that can be released. And so I spent a lot of time this morning, more time than is healthy, thinking about this. So it's good that you asked me on the day that it's all fresh in my mind. But look, I would definitely go with the top centre forward, whoever that is, whether it's Isak, whether it's Sesko. I think the time has passed now. We can't cheap out on the centre forward option. It's a really important piece of the team, a really important part. Whether it's Sesko or Isak, I don't think dramatically changes the way we're going to play. And that's why I'm not saying that Sesko's as good as Isak, by the way. The point I'm trying to make is that I think stylistically, it doesn't change a great deal in terms of what we're going to do as a team. Now, I think they both will bring you different things. I think Isak is technically better. I think he's trickier. I think he's got more variety to his game. He's almost the A-grade option. But I'm not against the Sesko signing either. I quite like the look of Ekitike, by the way. I think when I've done a bit of analysis and research on him recently, and I looked at some of the underlying metrics, there were a lot of similarities between him and Alexander Isak. Again, not saying he's as good as Isak, but if that's the prototype, if that's what you really want, then he feels like a sort of closer match. Then we go into the midfield, and I think that this is a really interesting thing. I don't mind us signing Zubimendi because I don't deny for a second that he is technically a very good footballer, great line breaker, all the rest of that stuff, and will set the tempo. But my worry with Zubimendi is physical. Is he ready to sit at the base of a Premier League team, pull the strings, but also have to do all the other stuff that goes with it? The stuff that Thomas Partey has been able to do, the stuff that Declan Rice can do. Declan Rice maybe can't do the other side of what Zubimendi would bring, but he can certainly do the physical stuff. He can do the hard yards. I've been thinking about a reshape in midfield. I don't think that we should continue to play with a 6 and 2 8s. I think what we need to do in order to accommodate someone like Zubimendi, if indeed the club really do believe he's the guy, is you need to drop Declan Rice that little bit deeper. Declan Rice needs to sit next to Zubimendi and do all the things that Zubimendi can't. And then you use Declan Rice's incredible fitness and range to get up and get into attacking spaces when he can. But he's always got to be switched on to that 6 position and the requirements of that as well. And a great example of when this really worked for us was, do you remember last season where our season started to curtail? We looked like we were in trouble. And then we went through a period where Partey was out and we played Jorginho and Rice as a 2. Do you remember that? And we went on this, that was the beginning of our really great run. And that was because we had a new balance to the team. Odegaard had more freedom because he didn't have to drop deeper into positions to help out defensively. We didn't have to constantly push the fullback inside, which had become a little bit predictable. Instead, we could go on the outside if we wanted to as well. And that was all as a result of maybe an accident. Maybe Mikel Arteta looked at Jorginho and went, I got to play you. I love you in that you bring so much on the ball, but I really do worry about you being able to cover those distances and being able to live with the requirements defensively. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slightly tweak Declan Rice's role, and I'm going to get Declan Rice to help you out, meaning you can play your game and he, to a degree, can still play his. And I actually think that worked for both of those players, because Jorginho thrived having someone next to him that could do the dog work, the work that Jorginho couldn't do. But also Declan Rice thrived in being the guy that was breaking up attacks all the time, because for me, that's still his biggest strength. So that worked really, really nicely. And I just wonder if bringing in a Zubimendi, for instance, who I think everybody's probably got concerns about physicality and all the rest of it, that might be a sign that we're going to adjust our shape a little bit. And in the midfield, we're losing Jorginho, we're losing Partey by the looks of things. And so, in theory, you need to bring in two. I think the second one is Miles Lewis-Skelly.
I was going to about ask you about him.
I don't think you need to go and throw a ton of money at another midfield player. I think Miles Lewis-Skelly's that guy. I think that at left back, we're well stocked. You know, White's back, so Timber could play there. We hope that Tomiyasu will be back next season. You know, we don't know that Zinchenko's leaving yet. We've still got Jakub Kiwior at the club. Calafiori can play there. There are options in that position. So I wouldn't be too concerned about taking Lewis-Skelly out of there and using him as a midfielder, which I think is his best position. He's done a bit of a Saka, hasn't he, Lewis-Skelly, in that an opportunity came up for him in the first team. It wasn't in his best position, just like with Saka when he came through at left back. But he's taken to it like a duck to water and proven to the manager that he deserves a place. And so I think the natural next step for him is to play in his rightful position. And I think he can be fantastic in there. So Zubimendi, Lewis-Skelly would be my two midfield options. And then I'll be looking further forward and spending the bulk of my money, I think, in the centre forward position, because there would have been a lot of talk about the right wing as well. Maneri's come through. And so, you know, the Haylenders are really going to help us here.
Yeah. And I didn't have it on my bingo card for Lewis-Skelly to be ahead of Nwaneri at this point. But it's beautiful to watch. Like, the two of them have done so tremendously well. And I think the story of the season at Arsenal is the emergence of these two young players and what they've been able to do. So would you, while we're on this subject, we'll get to threats in just a sec. Hit the like button, everyone. And that helps the channel if you're in, and it's for free and you're getting great content. This is a really good conversation, because I feel like we've missed the boat to kind of maybe have been here this season. Of course, not with Lewis-Skelly and Nwaneri. And sometimes by default, you know, players emerge, and that's exactly what's happened, right? Injuries have given them an opportunity, and that's part of football. So, Harry, what would you say if the Arsenal next season it's David Raya in goal, Benjamin White on the right, Saliba and Gabriel, Timber on the left, Lewis-Skelly, Declan Rice, Odegaard, Saka, Sesko, Gyökeres. I don't think we're getting Isaac. I'm sorry, everyone. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Believe.
And Nico Williams on the left, or Eze somewhere in this team. Like, what does that look like to you? Your starting 11.
My starting 11. So it depends on the game, and I think it's really important that we have options and sort of the opportunity to shake things up. So, like, Timber would be my left back in games, for instance, against Real Madrid away. Like, going to the Bernabeu, if Ben White's fit enough, then Ben White plays at right back for me and Timber plays at left back, because it's defense first. So I think to be able to have that option, but then to also, in a home game where you need to force the issue a little bit more, where you're willing to take a bit of a risk and push one of your fullbacks into midfield or further on, I'd like to see Calafiori play there. I think it depends on what you're setting up for. I definitely think we sign a midfielder, so I don't think it would be Lewis-Skelly and Rice. But would I have an issue with it being Lewis-Skelly and Rice? No, I wouldn't, because I think Lewis-Skelly can be that dictator. I think what Lewis-Skelly has as well that a lot of other players in our group don't have is the ability to carry the ball long distances, uses his body really well, protects it really well. And he goes on these kind of charges through the middle of opposition teams. And I know it's probably easier to do that from left back because you're coming in unchallenged. You're not one of the midfielders. But I think we're going to bring in a midfielder, whether it's Zubimendi or someone else. I don't know. I know there's a lot of reports claiming that that's a deal that's well on its way to being done. But if he comes in, Zubimendi, then you've got to change the structure of the midfield ever so slightly, as I've said. Nico Williams, I like Nico Williams. I wasn't massively sold on him prior to the Euros, and then I saw him in the flesh. I think I watched him live during the Euros 3 times while I was out in Germany, and I was blown away every time. I thought it was fantastic. I look at his season this season, though, and it has been a bit underwhelming just on the numbers side. And now I'm kind of in the space of, I like him, and if the price is right, I'd do it. But he's not an Isak where I'd go, whatever it takes, do it. Isak is the one player I look at this summer and I go, whatever they want, you pay it. I don't feel that way about Sesko. I've got a ceiling in terms of what I would pay on him. I feel the same about Gyökeres. I'm the same with Nico Williams. 50, 60 million pound, let's do it. If you start going beyond that, then it's silly. And I know he's got a release clause. I'm not sure exactly where that release clause sits. But, you know, the wages is a big thing as well. You mentioned it earlier on. I think clubs are more worried about that a lot of the time than they are about the transfer fee, because a big business can raise funds to make a one-off transaction. Yeah, it's often the strain that then puts on the club moving forward that they're most concerned by. Yeah.
A few of you talking about Adam Wharton, you know, he's being watched by Real Madrid, Adam Wharton. That's how highly rated, you know, this kid is. Acuna, of course. You know, Graham Hunter said, even though Williams is having a bad season, that people shouldn't give up on him. He's a really, really talented player. So we'll have to see. Thank you for sharing that with us, Mr. Symeou, manager, gaffer.
I'll any other I get so much grief, I might as well take the job as well and get paid for it.
I want to, before we get to threats real quick, and I'll try and get you out real quick after that. Trying to keep it to an hour, Harry, so you can go have your sublagya. I wanted to put this up as opportunities. Where is it from? Shaitanya is asking me what plays we would sell. I think we need a left-sided player. I mean, is Nwaneri the right-sided option now for Saka? Maybe you could save the money there. You talked about Lewis Skelly and dovetailing in midfield. You need a striker. Do you need cover for Saliba and Gabriel? Probably. Do you need cover on the right, or do you need cover on the left? And do you need a goalkeeper? Who, Harry, are you selling? Forget Fabio Vieira and the players out on loan. I think it's time to just cut the umbilical cord on those players.
Yeah.
Who are you selling? We mentioned Trossard. I asked you about Martinelli, but if push comes to shove and you need to make this team stronger to have those extra inches versus the Manchester Cities and the Liverpool, who are you selling?
Okay, so I will just quickly make the point that I believe the wages is the bigger problem. So when we talk about selling, I'm not just thinking about who I'm going to get a fee for. I'm thinking about what I am getting off of my books in order to give myself the wiggle room to be able to then do the business that I need to, right? So a few players that I would look at. Leandro Trossard. I like the guy, but if you're going to go and get Nico Williams or someone of that ilk, then you don't still need Trossard and Martinelli. And Martinelli has a very unique skill set, in my opinion, in terms of his pace, his directness, his relentless running. I think he gives the team so much defensively as well. We've seen that a few times this season. I think I'm not ready to give up on Martinelli yet, but I'm kind of in the space where I wouldn't mind seeing Leandro Trossard go. So Leandro Trossard's one I would potentially move on. Jakub Kiwior, I don't see him having a future at Arsenal Football Club, even less so now that Lewis Skelly's come through. Zinchenko's another one that I would probably let go. And again, Zinchenko is definitely one of the big earners at Arsenal. So that's with a view to saving yourself some funds. And then we talked about them a little bit earlier on, Partey and Jorginho. It's two players that are going to leave by the looks of it. That I know Thomas Partey is. I don't know about Jorginho specifically, but I know that Partey's on a big contract. I'd imagine Jorginho is too. And so that's another two that I'd let go. I think if you get Zinchenko, Jorginho, Partey, and Trossard off your wage bill, I think that gives you loads of wiggle room for the summer.
Yeah.
And I don't think we particularly miss any of those players, not to the point where we can't replace them. We'd miss Partey and Jorginho for sure because they have a role to play in this team at the minute. But we talked about regeneration of the midfield, and I think that is kind of coming to a natural conclusion. And so it's the right time to move on from them. And it might not be about raising 30, 40 million out of the players. We won't raise any money out of them because they're both out of contract, but getting them off the wage bill is massive, really big.
Yeah. And I agree. And also, you know, I think the evolution of football teams, sports teams, it's okay for players to have done a job for you over a time, but it's also okay to maybe outgrow them, or they've outgrown you, right? I mean, Saliba may think he's outgrown us and he wants to go to Real Madrid and win. We don't know that, right? Gabriel Jesus was super infectious when he first came. Zinchenko, they brought that culture of, you know, competitiveness and the winning mindset that spread throughout our team. And until Jesus got injured in that first season, you know, I thought he was great, but we've outgrown them, right? Maybe the same thing with Trossard. He's been a great, you know, bargain, really, when you look at what we were going to pay for Mudryk in January, saved the club a shit ton of money, and here we are. So I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling like you've outgrown the team, or, you know, vice versa. Let's get your threats, Harry, before we close up. What threats are there out there? And mostly for me in a SWOT analysis, threats are things that you can't control.
Yeah. A Manchester City revival. I think they spent a lot of money in January, and I think that they are building the foundations for a new team, and any team with Pep Guardiola at the helm of it, you have to be worried about. So they're a problem. And I think that one of the things that's really going to sting come the end of this season is that when they fell away, we weren't there. That's going to be the biggest regret, I think, that people have come the end of this campaign. And we can't control whether or not they return to former glories, but given the amount of money they spent in January and what I expect them to do in the summer, I think we're probably going to have to worry about them again, which is not good. Obviously, Liverpool, I don't really know what to think about Liverpool, because while they've had a really good season, they didn't really strengthen last summer. And you look at the contract situations of three of their most important players, and you don't really know whether that's going to end well in all cases. Like, I think Van Dijk stays. Do I think Trent stays? Not really. Do I think that Mo Salah stays? Don't know. But if he does, there's no guarantee that he continues at the same level. Liverpool are a potential threat for me. But I'm not exactly sure how that's all going to go. But I think the biggest threat, and that's why I've left this one till last, is expectation. Expectation takes away all the fun. Expectation can put you in a place where you're looking for perfection, and perfection isn't achievable in this sport. It's not. Even the Invincibles, 38 games unbeaten in the Premier League, never going to be done again probably, but we drew 12 games. So there's no perfection. You can't find perfection. And because of the trajectory we'd been on prior to this season, right? We had two really good campaigns. Then we fell off. And because we've fallen off, even though there are reasons and there's an explanation for why we are where we are today, in my opinion, I know that's not a view that's shared by everybody, but because of what's happened this season, the expectation just got bigger for next season. And to have to fight against unrealistic expectation, you're in a lose-lose situation. Win the league, people will say, well, you should have won it the season before. Don't win the league, and it's a failure. And I worry that we're in that place now where people have almost forgotten that the reason the standards are so high and the bar is so high is because Mikel Arteta has been a big part of turning this huge ship around. Has he been perfect? Is there things that he's done wrong? Of course there are. Are there things that the club's done wrong? Of course there are. But I think the progress has been very, very quickly forgotten. And in the pursuit for success, there's a level of expectation that I just don't think you can ever satisfy. You can never satisfy that thirst that fans have. I mean, I got into a ruck on TalkSport earlier today with Gabby Agbonlahor in the morning. Nothing personal to Gabby, but, you know, he was sitting there and they were reacting to some clips where Martin Keown was going at it with Simon Jordan, and that word bottle it was thrown around. And I got wound up listening to the package before I was about to go on air, and I lost it. And I said, some of those comments are a disgrace. Some of the people that are making those comments have played the game at the highest level and should know better, because that is what we are dealing with. And what my big worry is with the expectation is that people like that are getting into the minds of people that are Arsenal supporters, and it's creating a divide again. And division is another threat that we have. And division is not a good thing. We all saw what things were like at the back end of the Wenger tenure, and division was right at the heart of that. So for me, yeah, talk about other teams, City, Liverpool. I don't think Chelsea will be anywhere near us. I don't think United will be anywhere near us. Not worried about Spurs either. But, you know, it's pressure, expectation, and then the external noise that seems to then develop into division that I'm really worried about.
Yeah, and that's, I agree. It was Rebecca Lowe said on our show, expectation kills joy. And that's what's happened at Arsenal. And I don't think it's wrong to have high expectations based on pedigree and history. You know, Liverpool fans had high expectations. It took them 30 years to win a title. I think in what satisfied their fans was in the midst of that, they won a Champions League, won a Champions League again, went to a final again, won domestic cups. Arsenal will never get, and I heard your segment on TalkSport ahead of the show. I wanted to make sure that I saw that. I thought, I'm okay for people criticizing Arsenal, right? I don't think it's a fair playing field. I saw the Martin Keown segment too, and there's no doubt in my mind, and it's not kind of being naive. If we had lost that League Cup final to Newcastle, they would have called us bottle jobs.
100%.
If they did it when we didn't win the league, they were going to do it in a cup final as well. And I thought Martin brought up a reasonable question. They, you know, Liverpool get trounced out of the Champions League. They lose a cup final. Are the wheels coming off? All fair questions, which they've done to Manchester City. You know, they've questioned Pep Guardiola this season. And I thought that Simon Jordan was super defensive, and it just proved to me that the narrative is clickbait Arsenal fans, and rise to the bait. I agree with you, Harry. Yeah. Sometimes it's very difficult to keep quiet. And the package, just a quick second, the package ahead, I don't mind if you come at it from, has Mikel put square pegs in round holes this season? Yes. Have you had injuries? Yes. Have you had decisions go against you? Yes. Has that happened to other teams? Yes. Have you regressed this season? Yes. It's the laugh tracks and the disrespect. I would have gone in there lit, totally lit.
Well, this is the thing I did. You know, I got up in the morning in a really kind of chilled mode. Like it's the international break. Like, what's the point in, you know, being wound up? I'm trying to kind of disconnect a little bit. And I heard that package and I went off the handle, you know, because I just think that you're absolutely right. The way it's put together, the way it's, you know, the way it's all packaged up is really, really frustrating. And listen, I work at TalkSport. Yeah. So listen, they're never going to tell me off for having a different opinion. It's a station that is essentially built on opinions. So I've got no qualms about saying this. But when you look at the video that they put of it on YouTube a little bit later on in the day, the title was Chomp, 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 because obviously Shabana Hearn had sort of said that while I was, who I love, by the way.
Yeah, I love
really
Shabana.
Good friend of mine. She'd said that while I was speaking. And then the title is Arsenal fan Harry Symeou blasts Simon Jordan for use of nonsensical term. I didn't even mention Simon Jordan's name. So if that in itself, it doesn't tell you what the game is, then I'm sorry, but you need to wake up and smell the coffee. And this is where I get frustrated, because I see a lot of people, friends of mine, family members of mine, that watch things like that, not necessarily that particular clip, but clips that have been baited, things with very provocative titles, and they start to be influenced by it. And you have to be able to just, you know, just block out the noise, forget about it, don't get involved in it, don't get dragged into it. You have to be able to make up your own opinions, come up with your own thoughts. And I feel like these days that is lost on a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And I've said this on this show many times, and Neil's just said it too. The only way to change the narrative is to win. And I don't even think it's going to take a League Cup or an FA Cup. It's going to take winning the Premier League. They will not respect Mikel Arteta until he wins something. They will absolutely. You wait. If we get trounced by Real Madrid, it's going to be horrible, right? It's going to be like Bayern Munich situation. If we beat Real Madrid, I'm very curious to know what that narrative will look like, because on the back pages the following day, Aston Villa dominated. It was all about Aston Villa getting to the quarterfinals. And you know what? I get that, because Aston Villa, it's been a long time coming for them, but they're ready at the knives to do the Emery makes it to the semi-final, Arteta fails. I can see it right now, right? The only way we're going to get respect is if we win things, Harry, and that's just the reality of the situation.
But my frustration is, and I agree with that, right? You got to do it to shut everybody up. I get that, but I don't ever remember anybody talking in this way about Jurgen Klopp when Liverpool were vying to win the Premier League. It was always, oh, what great football they play. Oh, they're going toe-to-toe with one of the greatest teams we've ever seen, which was all true, by the way. Not denying that. Mm-hmm. But the difference in the perspective is wild to me. Okay, Klopp won the Champions League, which is huge for sure. But nobody ever said that he bottled it in the Premier League when he fell short to Manchester City on numerous occasions. It's just the difference in the angle from which this is approached. That's what really irritates me. You want to say that we lack a striker? You're right. You want to say that we've put square pegs in round holes, as you said? You're absolutely right. You want to say that we failed to do business in January that would improve our chances of maintaining our challenge? You're absolutely right. I agree with all of those things. But the perspective from which they come at it is completely different. And it feels like, because Arsenal have this big online presence, big fan base, there's lots of amazing podcasts out there, there's lots of platforms, they find it, beneficial to go after us more than they do after other clubs. And that's just fact.
Yeah. And you can go back, and I've played it on this show. Super Kev and I used to talk about it all the time. The George Graham speech, where they're all leaning up against the wall and George is talking about referees. And, so people who say we're making excuses, we're not. There's a little bit of a history there. And, let George Graham, a legendary manager, tell you about it. Don't listen to me. You can go find the video. I'll play it in the next show for you guys as well, if you want. Going to Liverpool and doing what we did in '89, that irked a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
I think the baton that people want us, they batter us with the baton of European pedigree is very poor. Can't argue with that. It is, right? And then the other thing too is going invincible is the one thing that we have over every single team. And if you've noticed, Manchester United fans don't really talk about the treble anymore. Manchester City took that away from them. And I think there's nothing more the media would love for a City or a Liverpool to go unbeaten, to take away the bragging rights of being invincible. And let's be fair, it's the only bragging rights that we have left over everybody. And I think that has created resentment as well, because we've done something that nobody else in modern day football has done. And, anyway, I think this is something we have to get used to. And until we win, Harry, it's not going to change. So, and we have to be prepared as a club, Harry. We've got to be prepared as a club.
But we've also got to defend ourselves against it, though, as well. That's why I got wound up this morning, because I feel like we're in a space where, almost we've become so critical of our own teams at times that we've forgotten what the term supporter means. Like it was different when I was growing up. So when I was a kid, I used to go into school. Someone said something bad about Arsenal. I was on the defensive, and I was going to find something to say about your team and your club and your manager and your players. Like it's this thing of like, oh, people seem to think now it makes you a bigger supporter if you're the guy that says the truth. Like a lot of the time it's not the truth, which is incredibly frustrating, but everybody wants to be the righteous one when actually the very core of what we love about this sport is that tribalism. And if you are one of those people that goes, oh, do you know, like if you sat there this morning and listened to Gabby Agbonlahor and you went, he's right, you ain't an Arsenal supporter for me, because he made some valid points, but he clearly went over the line. And if you can't see that, I don't think you're an Arsenal fan. Sorry, like you're not an Arsenal supporter in my book.
Yeah.
People won't like that. But as a supporter, you have not a responsibility to defend everything that's said about your club or to defend them on everything. There are some things that you can't. But on the basics, you need to be ready to put people right. And I don't think that a lot of our supporter base is willing to do that anymore, which is a shame. Maybe it's a change in society. Maybe it's a change in the way people consume things. Maybe I'm just an old waffler that doesn't know what he's talking about.
No, and you know, there are a lot of people that are mad at me that I have Dan on the show tomorrow, right? And Dan knows it. Dan sees it in the comments, and you know, Dan has a certain. Let's, you know, I know we've got to go, but it's a long conversation. But the point is that there's a lot of people from within the community that choose to broadcast in a certain way. That's your choice. Broadcast how you wish. I'm always going to welcome people on this show that have different opinions to me. I got so much hate mail when I had Jason Cundy on the show. I know you just did a segment with him on Inside Gooners as well. Jason's been on this show probably 5 times. I think the vitriolic kind of sentiment got really intense after his comments with Miles Lewis Skelly. And I challenged him on that. And, you know, he had regrets about how he made his point about Miles Lewis Skelly. But he loves Waneri. He loves Saka. He loves these players. He's going to support them, you know, as an England man. So I get it. There's the vitriolic kind of expressions. I don't endorse that, but I can't stop someone, Harry, from having an opinion.
No, so
and I think we're talking about how you express those opinions as well.
I think we're talking about how you express those opinions. And, you know, I've known Dan Potts for a long, long time, and I pretty much disagree with every opinion that he has on Arsenal. And he pretty much disagrees with everything I say about Arsenal. Right? We're not on the same page opinion-wise at all. But where I get frustrated is that, and I'll say this to Dan, this is not a secret. I'll say this to a lot of people. Where I get frustrated with, not Dan specifically, but with that type of feeling around Arsenal, is that when someone sits there and talks complete and utter nonsense about our club, spews facts that are untrue, like, for instance, Arsenal threw the title away last season. They were 8 points clear. Hold on a minute. Man City had a game in hand. It was 5 points technically, because everybody expected them to win that game in hand. So my point here is that whether you agree with what the club do, what the manager does, the players that we sign, etc., the tactics, whatever, as a supporter, you should call out the BS. And there's a lot of BS going around about Arsenal. Like there's been a whole load of BS recently about Mikel Arteta not wanting a centre forward. I know for a fact from conversations I've had that he did want a forward in January. He sat in press conferences and said, I need a forward. I need someone. We're short. This idea that he didn't want that is BS that is being peddled to back up a certain perspective and a certain narrative. Now, you can be as negative and as vitriolic as you want about the football club. You can have a completely different opinion to me. I respect that. But as a supporter, your duty is to call out the BS when non-Arsenal supporters are spewing it, or even other so-called Arsenal supporters. Where I get frustrated is where you get this toxic rubbish being put out there, and then people, because they're annoyed at the club, they're annoyed at the team, whatever, they just go, yeah, that's, yeah. They just nod their heads. Facts. Yeah, I agree with you. It's not facts. It's actually BS. Call it out for what it is, and I'll respect your side of the opinion. But unfortunately, you don't get that. People, when they're in that headspace, when they're angry, when they're frustrated, what they do is they start to defer to the other side. Well, you can't, because football is tribalistic and we're Arsenal supporters. And you got to back your team as and when you can. Not blindly, but as and when you can.
Yeah. And, you know, we could go on and on, because I would say to you, well, Mikel's had 5 years to sign a striker, and he hasn't. And, you know, I think there's signs that maybe there is change. Maybe they didn't want to give him more money in January, Harry. They didn't want to spend 60 million on Ollie Watkins. They wanted to spend 40. They knew Andrea Berta was coming in. They're like, no, we've given you enough. We're going to wait till the summer and see what this guy does. Maybe Edu left because, you know, Mikel had too much power. Maybe Edu left because he wanted more power. There's 2 sides to every story, and then there's the truth. And so, yeah. And I get it. I think I always say there's a clip, there's a segment I did on the video section that is stop telling Arsenal fans how to support their team. And I'm very much of this volition. And there's only 3 rules. Don't be racist. Don't be homophobic. Don't be any of the Ibic words. Don't be vitriolic, and, you know, don't be a bully. But support the team how you want. And we have a huge global fan base. It's massive, absolutely massive. And they just want to win. They want what's best for their team. And it's okay to not believe in Mikel Arteta anymore. It's okay to think that Kai Havertz isn't the guy to play up front. You know, it's okay to think that Waneri should have been played when Odegaard was injured, and why didn't Mikel know that? You know, it's okay to not believe in the owners and think they haven't invested in the team. I think they have. It's okay to think that maybe we've wasted money on bad players like Fabio Vieira, and is Mikel Merino the right guy? It's okay to think all of those things, and it's okay to think the opposite. So as long as we do it in a fashion where we're not killing each other, I think that's the most important thing. We came to a point as Arsenal fans where we were very much together, and we've been on this journey. I think people forget how crap and how rock bottom we hit as a club. And now you want that success. And I think if we were losing the title again to Manchester City, would it be a little bit different? It's because Arne Slot's come in his first season and he's getting results. Now, he didn't inherit the same mistake as Mikel Arteta. I totally believe that. But he's come into English football, never managed before. He's got some world-class players, big personalities, and he's found a way to win. Sure, they haven't had injuries, but we didn't have injuries either last season, and we failed at the last hurdle. So there's a lot to unpack there, Harry. But overall, I agree with you on the supporter versus fan thing.
It's like, you know, like in a playground when you were at school, and there'd be like a bully, and you'd look around, and like at the time, nobody would sort of pipe up, and the bully would bully the bullied, and everybody else would stay quiet, whatever. When you grow older and you look back on it, you go, I should have probably said something. Like, I should have stepped in. I should have. And that's where I feel that some of the Arsenal content creators have got to. The space where they've got really strong opinions, and that's fine. You can have your strong opinion. But they're also almost, because they've been so negative about certain aspects, they're almost like afraid to call out the BS as well. And that's where I get wound up. You want to have a different view to me, no problem at all. The amount of times, so if I go live on the Chronicles of a Gooner, I get it in the chat and I put a link in the chat and I say, come on, let's have a debate. Let's have a discussion, respectful debate discussion. Nobody joins. Nobody joins because they don't want to have that discussion. It's much easier to jump on the bandwagon of negativity. It's much easier to go, yeah, you're right, or that's facts, or whatever the line is that people use. It's much easier to do that than to push back on the bits that you disagree with. And I think as a supporter, you have a responsibility to push back on what is clearly nonsense. And I don't see that. We don't get enough of it. And it's frustrating.
I think too that, you know, people mistake opinions as facts. I think that's a little bit
yeah. Oh man, that winds me up more than probably anything in the world right now.
Yeah. And you know, it happens. It happens. Right. Harry, tell us where everyone can find you if you've been living under. I agree. It's been a great show and really good stuff. And, you know, Harry and I sometimes don't agree about stuff. And you know, and it's great because we do have a WhatsApp group. And this is what I love, is that you can disagree with Potsy. He's not going to be disrespectful to you, right? And I will stand up for Dan Potts when it comes to that. He's always defending us in his live chat when we're on his show, right? He's got your back. Now, his views might be totally the opposite and totally different. But I think if we do it, you know, with respect, that's the most important thing. And Harvey wants to know when the last time you had Gologassi. That is probably the most important question of the evening.
It was probably about a month ago, I think. My yaya phoned me up and told me she made me some because she knows I love it. And so whenever she makes it, she always makes a separate serving for us. And then I have to go around and pick it up. And if I don't go around and pick it up quick enough, she sends my poor granddad out in his dressing gown in the car to drive it around. And it makes me feel bad that he had to leave the house when he's not too well. So I prefer, so if she calls me and says it's ready, I'm round there. You know what? We're due one, actually. I need to give her a shout.
Yeah.
What she's
For those of you who don't know, Gologas is like this stew with what is that vegetable called? Yeah,
I have no idea. I have no idea what it's
Google
called in English.
Gologassi. Go follow Harry at Harry Symeou, the Chronicles of a Gooner. What have you got coming up, Harry?
We've had a load of episodes come out this week. There will be something coming over the weekend. Not sure exactly on what it will be and the timing of it, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm going away tomorrow for a couple of days. I am definitely going to take Saturday off, but you'll get something on Sunday for sure, later on in the day, assuming I'm not too hungover. But yeah, just subscribe to the Chronicles of a Gooner, pretty much daily content at the moment. You can get it on YouTube, or you can get it on your preferred audio platform, whichever you prefer.
Brilliant. Great stuff, Harry. Thanks for the Qatar extra time, World Cup extra time today. Squaddies, we'll be back tomorrow, 4 o'clock UK time with Potsy. Please share this show with your friends, and at ease, don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them, kids. See you tomorrow.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.